and welcome to episode 128 of A Gamer Looks at 40. I'm Bill Tucker, and this episode marks the 10th part of the Final Fantasy VII series, and we are at the home stretch. We had a ton of interviews and a ton of clips that never quite made it into the main episodes, and this is what this episode is all about. Just not clearing out the backlog, but sharing just random stories from the people that made this Final Fantasy VII series so special. There will be a part 2 to this coming next week where I'll finish out the series completely, and then we'll take a quick Final Fantasy break. So if you have a favorite that you don't hear today, you'll probably hear them next week. Starting us off is Diana Luceria. You can find her at StormVexed on all the social medias as she shares stories of how she got into Sephiroth cosplay and some stories of her at conventions and experiencing the character. I'd like to pivot a little bit to Sephiroth because obviously that's a character you have a lot of connection with. You do your cosplay. So first off, why have you selected... Well, first off, how'd you get into cosplay and that whole world in general? And then we can move a bit into the Sephiroth character, which I think is your main one that you portray, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm just getting started, I think.
Wow. Okay.
I want to do more Final Fantasy cosplay, but I've just no time right now. I think I always liked Halloween when I was little. I think a lot of people, like to dress up when they were little. And I didn't do too much of it, but I think my first, I didn't even know, what was it? No, I knew it was called cosplay. Like in high school, I was into anime, of course. And I was taking Japanese because it was the only school in the state that had Japanese. So I went there for Japanese. Like that's how determined I was. And there was a new local convention, Animazement, in North Carolina that had just started. And it was in its second year by the time I heard about it. And it was still very small. And I was like, well, I think my friends were also dressing up. And of course, I did something completely different from them. They did a whole group cosplay. And nice. And I didn't know. I mean, I had taken sewing lessons in school, like home ec, but I did not know where to start. So I went to the Yellow Pages. This is dating me a lot, but I went to the Yellow Pages. I found a seamstress because they just listed their number, and she was down the street from me. And I brought her a picture of Utena from Shoujo Kakume Utena, the Girl Revolution Utena, and I, in her school uniform with a sword, and I was like, "Can you make me this?" And she was like, "What?" Like, never heard of that before. Like working from a cartoon. Like
that's funny.
Yeah, and I was like, really? No one's ever. So yeah, like making a fantastic dress out of something somebody drew instead of like from a photo or from, duplicating something like that. That was the first time she had ever heard of that. So so she made my costume for me, and then I made all of the accessories because that was more like arts and crafts. It was a little easier. But man, I loved that cosplay, and I spent so much time on it because and I paid her a lot of money at the time. It was a lot of allowance. Sure. Okay, sure. I saved up a lot of money. When she told me how much it was, I think it was only $150, which seems like a lot to a teenager. But now I'm like, she would have charged me like $1,000 or something easy.
It's something, easy.
Yeah. 500 maybe, because it was a blazer. It was also a skirt,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So.
It was relatively simple than a lot of the other things. At least I didn't say, "Hey, can you craft me foam armor?" Right. It was a blazer, so she made me a blazer. But yeah, I wanted it to be perfect, so because the creators of Utena were at the show.
That's cool.
And I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, so I met the creator and the producer, and both at once, dressed as their character, and I was like, "This is a dream come true." And I don't think they told them what kind of convention it was. Like they showed up in North Carolina and they're like,
they just showed up and
there's like 50 people there. And I'm like, but I had the time of my life. So, but yeah.
What was their reaction when they saw you dressed as their character?
They loved it. You would think, like, I didn't have any anxiety in high school. It was great.
That's great.
I have tons of anxiety now. I know. I wish I could go back because I just didn't think of it. I was just like, this is what I want to do and this is going to be awesome. And I'm going to talk to them in Japanese. but yeah, they were so nice, and they liked my questions. They weren't boring questions, I guess. And I got pictures with them in my cosplay. So
that's very cool.
I got,
so,
yeah.
So you moved on. So you moved on to No, you're good. You moved on to Sephiroth, and
yes.
So what about Sephiroth inspired you to go that direction?
I think, well, so it's funny, you know, the him being so iconic and so just, you know, designed gorgeous, and the eerie green, and, you know, the long sword and everything. It's just always been in the back of my mind. Like, I've never created any, like, because I write stories, I did comics, I did a bunch of stuff, but it's like I was like, well, I can't top that, you know, so I'm not gonna even create like a clone or like a fan version. I'm like, no. So I've just always been a fan. Like, I'm not a fan like, oh my God, I want to date him, you know.
Right.
Yeah, because that would be difficult. I mean, he's gorgeous, don't get me wrong. It would be just, I can't figure out the logistics in my head. But yeah, he's super gorgeous and hot. But yeah, he's like a thought experiment. It's like if I'm bored, I just start thinking about all of the things that led to his creation, because we didn't know a lot at the time, like from the game, and they've expanded a little bit upon it.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I was super obsessed with Lucretia, his mom, because she's not in it a lot, and I was like, oh my God, I could write a whole novel just about her. It would probably be a horror story, but because she had kind of the short end of the stick of that story. But yeah, it's just always been in the back of my head, and you know, every once in a while it would crop up, and if they mentioned a Final Fantasy 7 thing, I would be like, oh yeah, I have to check that out. And then, quite recently, it's funny, I was playing another character that has extremely long hair and like front bangs, Integra from Helsing, Sir Integra from Helsing. And somebody was like, it's a blonde Sephiroth. And I had loved Helsing and wanted to cosplay Integra for 20 years. And so I that was like a dream come true. I didn't think I was going to do anything else on TikTok. I was like, this is it. This is my fun moment. I'm having fun. And I don't know, it was not just that comment. It was probably a lot of stuff in the air at the time, but I was like, could I pull that off? Because the crazy thing is that you can just buy a Sephiroth cosplay. Like,
sure.
There's no law against it. No one is going to come to your house and stop you.
True.
but yeah, there's like packaged, they're obviously from a Chinese sweatshop or something.
Right.
But they're relatively affordable and actually really high quality. I was kind of shocked. So yeah, I ordered it, and then I found a wig artist and ordered a wig because I didn't trust myself at all, and I did not want it to look. I know it's like cosplay isn't necessarily, it's the spirit, and everybody, closet cosplay is valid. I just want to say that, but it's like if I don't look I was like, if I don't look remotely screen accurate, no one will believe I'm him, and that would mean I failed. So
and you're embodying this character, because from what I've talked to other cosplayers, a lot of it is almost portraying the character. And if you don't feel comfortable in the outfit and the makeup and the hair, everything else, you're not going to be comfortable portraying the character. So that makes sense to me. Yeah, that totally makes sense.
And I could talk about this forever, but there were so many. I mean, it wasn't like logistical problems. It was one of those things where I just was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it, and then it showed up, and I was like, oh my God, what did I do? And then because the wig took longer, so I put on the costume, and then I immediately was like, what am I gonna do with my boobs? Like,
fair.
Oh no! Like, it's like,
it's a question.
Everyone's thinking about gender all the time, except for me, I guess. I'm just like, oh, and I was like, I don't want to be. I was like, maybe I could just film, bust shots, like up, shoulders and up, and I'm like, no, that's stupid. I mean, I don't have a lot of room right now, but I wanted to do full length shots and stuff. And then once I put on the costume, I was like, okay, this is kind of hot. Like I was like, why does this look okay? And then I started to really get into it. And then, the embodying the character thing, I guess, because I've also done some acting, but it's like, some actors use the costume to help them.
Sure.
Because they look at themselves and then they're like, oh, I don't see me anymore, which is definitely helpful.
Yeah.
And I feel like in a lot of my videos, like I feel like I've successfully pulled off visually. Like if you took a screenshot, I'd be like, there he is. There he is. There he is. But like overall, like I don't think I worked as hard. Like I didn't quite get him. I was more concerned with like the audio or the joke or
sure, yeah.
Looking cool. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I've really, because I didn't use his voice. I was trying to stay away from using English audio. I used some Japanese audio. But yeah, long story short, I don't know if I fully embodied him, but that is definitely a thing. Like Integra, when I put that wig on, I was like, I didn't think I looked anything like her. I was like, this is going to be just me in a wig. And then I was like, oh, because she's like who I want to be when I grow up. Like, so I was like, she's like one of my favorite characters of all time. And I felt like, I started getting a little lazy, but at the beginning I was like, I'm really channeling her. Like, I got it. Like, I know who she is from years of reading this comic book and watching the show, and like I identify with her and I know her. And then Sephiroth is like, not, like I guess I admire him. I respect the design, the creation, and as for what drew me to him, I think the thing that put me over the edge was the really cool line that is unfortunately in a very strange video game. I feel like it's either Kingdom Hearts or Smash Brothers, but it's I will never be a memory. And that like became his thing. Like that from that point on. I don't think he's ever said that before. That
interesting.
Yeah,
I'm not familiar with the line, but it sounds like a Sephiroth thing to say, especially given the context.
Yeah, and so I'm like, I don't remember the first time I heard that, but I was like, oh, that is his, and he said it a bunch of times now that I think people glommed onto that. But his general attitude the whole game was like, well, you're never going to get rid of me. Like you can try.
I'm gonna be here forever, and that's just what I'm going to do. Yeah.
And I also like Terminator for several reasons, but it's it never sleeps, it never stops kind of vague horror, like I just lost the word, but like anxiety, like the panic of like you'll never be free. You can't kill it. It's always gonna come for you. It never stops, it never sleeps. And like that's kind of like the shark in the dark water of the game, where like you're Cloud and you're fighting this corrupt governmental corporatocracy monster that's grown out of control, fascist empire thing that's like lying its ass off with propaganda, and you're trying to, first of all, he doesn't even care. He's like a mercenary for hire.
Yeah, just pay the check. Just sign the check and let me get on with it. Right.
And, Avalanche is painted as extremists. And I was like, I don't know, who dropped the freaking plate? Who's the extremist? Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's a segue. But yeah, I think it was that line. And then I was like, do I feel like him? And I feel like I don't know how to identify with him. It's a very strange relationship. As you can see, I can't explain it very well.
No, that's fine. It's hard. It's challenging because from what I'm gathering from it is you were intrigued by the character, and it almost feels like through this cosplay you're still exploring the character. It sounds like you're still trying to. What is this person about? And what better way to kind of figure that out is by actually embodying it. I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting that you're still on that journey and that you don't have like a quote unquote tight answer for it. That's fine. You don't have to. I think it's cool that you're using this cosplay and using the performances as a way to get to know that character more. And I think it's gonna be interesting as you evolve that character, what comes from that.
Yes.
I'll be interested to see that for sure.
Thank you so much for saying that so succinctly. Like that is probably what I was trying to articulate. Thank you.
It's all good. It's all good. I'd love to hear some stories of you at shows, like any reactions you got, any cool moments portraying Sephiroth.
Yes.
Like, I'd love to hear some of those stories.
Since it's somebody else, a wonderful artisan that's not me, made it. I haven't entered it in any contest, so it was literally just for fun. But I did debut it at Animazement, and I dragged my close friend. And she doesn't really know a lot. She knows Final Fantasy. She likes retro gaming, but she's not as big a fan as me. And she was, I think, trying to play Remake at the time, and she really liked Aerith. And I think she had been in. This was, oh my God, 2-3 years ago, something like that. And she had been around long enough. I think she knew all the spoilers, and I was and she's like, because I was like, could you please come to this convention? Like, we'll hang out, we'll have fun. But I feel like, especially because like, I didn't want the cosplay to be sexy. I just want to say I try very hard not to be sexy, but also I didn't want to make a big deal. And honestly, when I put the jacket on, I was like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, yes. I'm like, but I'm just like, I'm not even trying to be a man. Like, but it also, it felt like it didn't matter. So in case no one's seen my cosplay, like, not my boobs are not out, but they're like there.
Right. and they're present.
Right. And I feel like with where his like harness thing crosses, it's like right over top of them. So it didn't bother me after a while, but I did feel exposed suddenly thinking about walking around a convention floor, and it turned out to be fine. Yeah. Thankfully. No,
that's a very real concern. So that's smart that you brought somebody with you, just even if it's just for emotional support, that's a lot, that's a big step to go out there and do that.
Yeah. And I was shaking a little bit as, we parked, and I had to finish changing like in the parking lot, because I had like a wing. It wasn't that great. I hadn't really attached it, but she decided to do like quite a closet cosplay. She got a cosplay too. Like someone made it specifically to look like Aerith. And so she was Aerith and I was Sephiroth. And we were just walking around this con together. And, and I feel like, I don't know why. I mean, I know why I was nervous, because obviously it is a concern, when you go to a convention. Sometimes there are unsavory people who don't have boundaries. But then I was like, who's going to come up and try to sexually harass Sephiroth? Like, Who's that person? Because I kind of want to meet them. I'm going to be like, are you kidding me? And also, really? I had the Masamune, and I mean, it was, foam, but I'm like, don't step to me. And like, what, are you kidding? You want to die? And I feel like the aura of the character alone protected me from anyone who was like going to stare at me or like do something. People just kept asking, for not just for pictures, but like there were so many clouds. There was like a cloud every 5 feet. So I just kept walking from cloud to cloud, and then we would do a fight pose.
A fight pose or something,
And it was all about the character, and that was what was so refreshing. It was like, I wasn't me. I was this character that I'm just obsessed with, and that I love, and people are recognizing me as that. So I was successful enough without video editing that people were like, obviously that iconic outfit and sword is Sephiroth. So I was like, okay, cleared that hurdle.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it made me feel very good. Like, it wasn't like, some kind of validation I was expecting. It was just totally just chill. And then somebody did, and that's when I realized that the Sephiroth simps and the fangirls are so many. And that is actually more of the problem. Not the harassing, but like the constant people like dedicating their lives to you as you're walking through the con. Somebody called.
Did you get a lot of people stop? Did you get a lot of people calling for you and like, hey, like a lot of that? That's
now
cool.
I answer to Sephiroth was super.
That's really funny.
Not like
interesting though.
All the time, but I look around. Yeah.
That's interesting. So that's interesting that you actually find yourself answering to that name. Again, it shows that you are trying to embody that character, and even more than a homage, more than a homage, it's more like performance. That's really how I see it. Like when I watch your TikToks, it feels like performance. Like, and like Mama Terra and a lot of the cosplayers that I've started to watch via that kind of circle, it's performance. And I think that's really interesting and cool because as you're performing, like I said earlier, it looks like you're starting to try to really get to the meat of who Sephiroth is, which there isn't a ton of backstory.
No, I mean, it's there. I mean,
it's there.
I think there's. I know that there is a new game out, and it's a mobile game, and I can't play it. I don't want to play it. But it delves a little bit more in granular history from the time when he started in Soldier and got famous and stuff. And I almost don't even care. Like, I shell out money. You know, if you said Final Fantasy VII, I'd be like, like getting my credit card out. You know, like, what do you have for me? And but. You know, not everything. It's like the Maleficent movie that Disney made, the live action. And I'm like, I don't need this. Yeah. This is not who Maleficent is. She's an evil fairy. Let her be an evil fairy, for God's sake. Like, she just took the slightest excuse of being snubbed at a birthday party that she had no business thinking she was going to be invited to anyway. And she was like, look, bitches, I'm going to ruin all of your lives. And I was like, she was bored on a Wednesday. It's very relatable. We don't need the sob story. And I know that there's a huge tangent about to happen here. Okay. But I just want to say one more thing about the cosplay, and that's what brought me to TikTok, is like the cosplay community. And it was originally Star Wars for me because I was the last trilogy had just ended, and I was just like, I need more than that. I can't just stop, you know? So I ended up on TikTok after seeing a couple cosplayers, and they were making like really funny videos. And I went from the trilogy characters into this world of prequel characters, and people just like having the time of their lives, making the most ludicrous jokes you've ever imagined, and like fully dressed as these, you know, very convincing, like they could be cast in the movies. And I quickly like surrounded myself with like 20 or 30 people who all did Star Wars cosplay. And I was like, what is happening to me right now? Because I've always liked Star Wars, but I was like never a Star Wars fan. And now I'm like, am I now? Am I? Yeah. But my first cosplay official experience was anime. So I got through to Integra, and yeah, that key thing about performance, because I also miss acting. I love acting, and I love interpreting characters and, you know, embodying characters, and I think a lot of cosplayers love that. Especially, I know Mama Terra does. She knows Terra inside and out. So, totally. And the thing about the performance is that there are aspects of Sephiroth that I love that don't get talked about a lot. And I haven't really even scratched the surface of making videos about the topics that, even just snippets, like ideas. I really like making, like, you know, short music videos that show a whole scene, and then, you know, the back, you know, like the cute jokes and the stuff. I mean, I love it all, don't get me wrong.
Next up is Games with Coffee, talking about his Mobius 7 fan fiction. It's a fascinating story of a labor of love. Please give it a listen. And then following that, some talk about the PC version of Final Fantasy VII and the music therein. And as someone and I do want to spend some time talking about the fan fiction because I find that whole thing fascinating. That's going to be a good segue because you've had to build a lot of headcanon.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
You've spent a lot of brain cycles working headcanon. People may or may not know if they listen to this for the first time. They're not in the whole well-read Mage Gamers Week community circle of friends and podcasters. They may not know you you've spent years working on a Final Fantasy VII/Sonic fan fiction. Mm-hmm. So if people aren't familiar with it, I'd love for you to give a quick blurb about what it's about and why you started this and why.
Okay.
And, yeah.
All right, the floor is mine. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So the fanfic is called Mobius 7. It has its own website. It lives on its own place, yay. And that is Mobius VII, as in the Roman numeral 7. So Mobius, MOBIUS, VII.ca. You know, because you have to emphasize the Canadianness of it all. And Yeah, the whole premise of the story is if you take what would happen if you take the plot of Final Fantasy VII and merge it with the extended Sonic the Hedgehog universe. And I'm not just talking about the video games, I'm talking about the comics. Comics is in plural, because we got Archie comics, the IDW comics, we got the TV shows, Sonic, Saddam Sonic, Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, well, maybe loosely inspired by that one, Sonic X, even bits of Sonic Prime probably going to find its way in there somehow, like... Anything that had to do with in terms of media when it comes to Sonic the Hedgehog, finding the ways to integrate that into the plot of Final Fantasy VII. And believe it or not, there are a lot of parallels between the two. And it's fascinating to really think about how well both the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise and the Final Fantasy VII story just really meshed together. Because in essence, Sonic the Hedgehog, its main essence is around ecology and the nature of preserving nature versus the encroaching takeover of technology and pollution and on all that stuff. It's pretty much what you see in Final Fantasy VII with the live stream and Mako and Shinra exploiting this precious resource of life. I mean, I can go on, but I will go on, actually. And it's... that kind of came automatic. But, yeah, it's just all that stuff. And it kind of blew my mind when I first thought of the concept. It's almost be 20 years. I was 18 years old when I came up with this concept. I'm now 37, so 20 years, getting up on there.
That's amazing. That's such a journey too, and it's actually excellent work. I've read some of it, and I won't say I've read all of it, but I've definitely read some, and it's really solid writing and solid work, and you've blended the two worlds very nicely. It makes sense. And so, but I find it amazing that you just kind of thought of it as you just had a what if moment. And then you just spent the next 20 years working on this what if moment.
Yeah, basically, that's
building
exactly
this.
what happened.
That's crazy. I love that.
Yeah. It's I still can't forget how it all started. I was supposed to be working on an essay in philosophy. Like, I had a philosophy elective in college. And I decided, now, you know what, I'm just going to play Final Fantasy VII instead. And for some reason, I was thinking about Sonic the Hedgehog, because I had purchased, like, an entire back catalog of Archie Sonic comics during that time. And, just started reading it, and it's like, oh, this is, I mean, some issues can get really, really weird. But overall, the story is like it was deep. It was mature. It reminded me a lot about Final Fantasy VII in many cases, because it's complex. You have all these complex character arcs, and you have all these different motivations and stuff like that. And for some reason, I was playing through Final Fantasy VII, and my mind, like during the flashback sequence between Cloud and Zack, which is a secret flashback, by the way. If you visit the Nibelheim mansion as Cloud, when you get him back, usually it can start anytime at Disc 2, but you really should try to visit it in Disc 3 for that, dramatic effect. Right. And during that flashback, you see how Cloud and Zack escape, how they find their way towards Midgar, and how, Zack gets shot and Cloud inherits the Buster Sword from his still warm corpse. Yeah, I'm sorry, Zack. I love you. Don't be mad at me.
It's okay. It is what it is. It's how it happened.
Yeah, but in that moment, I was thinking about myself. It's like, that's kind of like Sonic and Tails, in the sense that Sonic is like Zack. He's that devil may care, lives for freedom, lives to just be the hero. Right. Kind of deal. Right. And Tails is kind of like the hanger on. Like, he looked up to Sephiroth, but he also looks up to Zack as well, as someone who like really really watched out for him, really took him under his wing in many cases. And it's like, yeah, that's basically the story of Sonic and Tails.
That's so interesting that you were able to connect those dots. How has the reaction been to it? Because
I'd say it's. I mean, I'd say like I've gained a good solid handful of fans.
Cool.
And it's like people who read my stuff. It's like, yo, I'm reading your stuff, regardless of whatever you write. I'm reading it because, I mean, I guess I'm that good. So
hey, it's awesome, man, and it's hard to carve out a fan base. It's a very unique premise, and and I think it comes from a really cool, pure place. So I hope more people check it out. I encourage people to do so. It is really, really fantastic stuff, and it's all available on your website, which is it Mobius? What's the actual website?
It's Mobius7, as in VII.ca.
Gotcha. Mobiusvii.ca. Definitely check it out. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. So if people want to go check out your work, they should, because it is really good. And you're working on the second novel still, right?
Yeah, I'm actually halfway through. I've taken a really long, a really long break, because I was working on a critique for Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I loved. I loved that game to death. I mean, I wasn't in love with it at first, but then I kept playing it, especially after I got my PS5. It was like one of the first games I played, like, to completion, and I just like, no, I can't. I love this game too much now. It's like re-experiencing the original Final Fantasy VII all over again in my eyes. That. So it's like, yeah. So I spent the good part of 6 months just working on that critique. It's finished now. I still have a little bit of editing to do. I got some screenshots to get, but yeah, you'll be able to find it on the Pixels fairly soonish. I'm hoping in the next week or two or so.
Nice, man. I'll check it out.
Yeah, we'll check that out. But I mean, if anyone does decide to read the fan fiction, I would really appreciate any sort of feedback. One of my biggest things is that I'm constantly striving for feedback on how to be a better writer. I mean, many people say, "Oh yeah, you're good." I'm like, no, I can't just be good. I can be better.
Right. What can I do to be better? Yeah.
What can I do to be better? It's a constant thing with me. I mean, I'm taking courses and stuff like that. And I mean, this is aside from all the Final Fantasy VII Sonic the Hedgehog fanfiction stuff. It's a skill that I find that I excel in, and yeah. I just want to find ways to make myself better. I want to find ways to make my story better. I mean, I just went and skimmed through the story, like the first book again, and I'm like, I noticed a few things I could change here. Not in terms of content, but in terms of story structure that I can do, and I'm not going to do it right now. Because I mean, I even mentioned it in my afterword. This is a living document. The story itself is a living document. It will change consistently based on how I'm progressing. I mean, second book, I can even put some spoilers in right now. Like the first 10 chapters of the second book is just dealing with the Nibelheim flashback.
Wow.
Or in my interpretation. My interpretation of it.
Yeah.
It's not even that too. It's just the gang trying to get a bit of respite as well too in the first town outside of the Midgar equivalent, right? And it just kind of I've been trying to do a lot of like character exposition and starting to inject some motivations to each person's like kind of character arc in a sense. I've completely changed like Red 13's story. Like his story is gone because there's a different character in it, and that character is more related to the Archie Sonic universe,
right? But
it also fits in perfectly because there's just this beautiful element of betrayal that I'm putting together for it, and I mean I'm hoping I can really just like have that great tension that leads up to that betrayal.
Yeah,
which I do kind of preluded it as a prologue to the book. Like the first thing that happens is this great betrayal, and they're like, why is there a betrayal right in the beginning of the book? How did this happen? And then I'm like laying out the exact sequence of events that led up to that moment. So it's one of my favorite ways to start stories in media res.
Yeah, just drop them right in. I love it. I absolutely love it.
And then you kind of have to work backwards to see how it all started. And I'm like writing this thing, and it's just like, oh my god, this is delicious. I just hope I can just pull it off. That's awesome, like my biggest fear. And then we have like side stories with like Knuckles as the leader of the Turks. Like he's basically the equivalent of Sang, but he has his own motivations to do things. And it's all related to, again, back to his role in the original games as the Guardian of the Master Emerald kind of deal. And I mean, I actually went through this entire story arc with my brother. I gave him the entire layout, the entire timeline, like the entire timeline of the story from start to finish. And he looks at me and he's like, "You're crazy. How did you think of all this? How did you think of all this stuff?" I'm like, "Dude, I spent years just like writing out a timeline. I know everything that needs to happen in the story." And with the introduction of some of the stuff in the IDW, I honestly did not really expect some of the elements in IDW to fit so well with my concept. But I'm not gonna put any spoilers in case, but
no spoilers. But
one thing I can tease is it involves more cyberpunk elements, lots and lots and lots of cyberpunk elements. And heck, there's even I'm even trying to develop a story arc with my Barrett character because his arm, like, I don't know if you know, like when somebody gets their arm amputated, like you feel phantom pains and stuff like that. There's a little mini arc in his story where he still kind of feels that. You know, he feels like his arm is still there, but it's not. It's just a piece of metal, and he's like grappling with that notion, which you don't think about in the original game. It's just he's just a dude with a gun on his arm. That's it. That's his entire modus operandi. But then you think of the stuff behind the gun, the man with a gun for an arm.
Totally.
Yeah. So it's gonna get heady, and I'm only halfway through, and now talking about this is like, okay, I really want to get back to it now. So
there you go. That's good. Nice. I keep hearing about this PC version of Final Fantasy VII, and it sounds like this wild unicorn that doesn't really exist, but more people keep saying that Final Fantasy VII existed on PC, which blows my mind. Yeah.
It absolutely did. It 100% did. It was made by Eidos Studios, Eidos Interactive, so the guys who made Tomb Raider. Yeah. Apparently, I guess they had a deal with Square Enix to port the game to PC. But the biggest difference between the PC version and the PlayStation version is the sound used in the PC version. So the PC version uses MIDI files. So like the music is in MIDI versus the sound format, the audio format on the PlayStation is called PCM.
Okay.
No. Listeners, you may want to fact check me on
That's
this.
That's fine. I'll do a quick fact check for you. But PCM, like a waveform kind of thing, like a CD audio type of thing. But that's interesting. That I can't imagine Final Fantasy VII with a MIDI soundtrack. That sounds. Yeah. I will have to source that out and play it right here with the magic of editing. But right there, that's where I'll throw it here, cut all this out, and make it all nice and purdy. That's really fascinating. Time to say thank you to the following amazing people who are supporting this show on Patreon. Starting with Lindsay Harney, Joey Coro, Greg Sewart, the Let's Play Princess, Tim Knowles, formerly of the Elitist, Seth Sergil of the All In Media Network, Julian of the Stage Select Podcast, BT Goebbels, Games with Coffee, Terry Kinnair, Philip Becker, Lucas Thompson, and the one and only editor extraordinaire, Pete Harney. If you'd like to join these amazing human beings in their generous giving to this program, then go on over to patreon.com/agamerlooks4040. Check out the tiers and sign up today. Next up Greg Sewart of the Player One podcast and Generation 16 series of videos, and Ian of the Nerds Abroadcast podcast talk about some of the mechanics in Final Fantasy VII. It's a topic we didn't cover too much on the show, but we did chat about the nuts and bolts a bit. They're going to talk a bit about the materia system and some other final thoughts about the game in general.
Getting back to Final Fantasy VII, though, talking about gameplay, one of the things that I was thinking about tonight when I was really sort of getting ready to get on this call is, and we touched on this a little bit when we talked about Final Fantasy VI, but they really went for the idea of you didn't have characters that had innate abilities, especially when it came to magic in Final Fantasy VII. And you didn't really, you did, I guess, a little bit in Final Fantasy VI, but there was the Esper system where you could, do summons and things like that. But with 7, they went all in on that with the materia system. Mm-hmm. I really, really liked that a lot, actually. Especially where you were limited to 3 players in your party at any one time. It was nice to be able to move things around and sort of just, you could pick a loadout, and when it came to magic and summons, for the most part, it's like it didn't really matter necessarily what characters you had in your party.
Right.
You just needed the right materia equipped. And I really liked that a lot, which is weird because I really liked the idea of, like, this is my healer, this is my fire user, this is my water user. Like, I'm a fan of that. But for what they were doing with Final Fantasy VII, the materia system made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And oh my God, the summons. They look so good.
They were amazing. I mean, they're so cool. I mean, by and large, so cool. I really like the materia system as well. For me, as somebody who never loved jobs in games, it was great for me because I was never a job. I mean, we've had this conversation, but I was never a jobs person. Like, I didn't like the risk of, am I leveling the wrong job for a scenario? I don't have enough information to choose what job I want. Absolutely. And I don't have enough bravery to just go for it. So what job should I pick for this scenario? I don't know. But what I liked about Final Fantasy VII, it's a very good way of putting it. It's a loadout as opposed to a job. How do I want to equip these characters based on the characters themselves? And regardless of who the character is, how do I want to spec them out now? And having that very simple to understand, yet very flexible system was really good. I remember walking away. That was the one thing I was saying. I really like this materia system. I think this is a very cool implementation.
I think that's a great point, too, that it was simple to understand.
Yep.
Because we were right on the cusp of, one of the things Final Fantasy VII did, I think, for the North American market is really broke it wide open for role-playing games in a way that the Super Nintendo hadn't. Mm-hmm. And that's not to denigrate the Super Nintendo or its RPG library. It was great for the people who knew about it and loved RPGs, but this was the thing that broke it wide open. But also, I feel like from that point onward, especially Japanese role-playing games got more and more complicated, and to the point that I've sort of I backed away from the genre because I didn't want to deal with exactly that. Because if I didn't understand a system, especially if it was a system that you had to, upgrade or level up or whatever, I was too paralyzed by the idea that I wasn't doing it right.
Yeah.
And I never, ever had that worry in Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah. It was more of like, I like this character, so I want this character to come along in the story because I want to see what's going on with this character. And if I'm with this character, I may learn something more about them. That was literally my only decisions because I knew I could just slap whatever materia on whatever weapon they had or armor. Because remember, they went down to, I think it's just like sword or weapon, armor, and accessory. I think there's
so. Yeah.
I think there's like 3. So they even pared that down to the bare minimum. Which, again, I think if you're a lover of RPGs, it's probably a disappointment. But for someone like me who probably is a bit more casual, I'm fine with that. That's not what I was there for. And I think the materia system was very elegant and in its simplicity, but in its customization power as well. Like, you can do a lot with it. I also love the materia system. It might be one of my favorites in Final Fantasy. I just love the. Yeah, did you find yourself experimenting a lot with it?
Oh yeah, it was something that I didn't really at first, but once I got used to it and started playing around with it, I thought, oh, I get it now. I can use this with this, and it creates this effect. Oh, this is great. I can do all sorts of things with this, and suddenly you're losing hours just playing around with this materia system.
Absolutely. No, it's a really great system because again, it allows for so much control and customization, and it's easy to figure out. Like it's not complicated, you know?
It's so simple. Even 13, 14-year-old me could figure it out. So yeah.
No, absolutely.
I got into that, absolutely. Playing it on the PC as well, I seem to remember the movement was with the number keys over on the right-hand side of the keyboard as well, which was novel to me. I'd never used them at all for anything. I mean, I played first-person shooters with WASD and the mouse, but never actually used the number keys for anything, and having to use those, oh, this is different.
Yeah, that sounds terrible. What do you think about the remake?
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I enjoyed it a lot. I think there were some aspects of it that I personally would have done differently as someone that loved the turn-based aspect of the original. The more action-oriented side of it was not without its faults. It was good, but I think if you remember the part where you're climbing up the base of one of the plates, I think it was, and there's a long winding staircase, and every 5 minutes you're being stopped by jetpack dudes who just hover over the other side of the railing where your sword can't reach them, and you're just thinking,
Lovely.
come on. Yeah, it's not without its faults, but I did enjoy it a lot, and I'll be even more controversial if you like.
Go for it.
I think at the ending it would have been even more of a shocker if Barrett had stayed dead.
Oh, okay.
Because I think that would have been a case of, no, they're not doing it. They're doing it. And then they didn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, of course, the whole, whispers thing, I am interested to see where they're taking that. Lots of disagreement, very heated arguments on Twitter that I've seen about that, but as a fan, I'm of the mindset of, let's see where they're going with this.
So you have a cautious optimism. You're like, you know what? I'm ready to, Yeah,
I think it could be something absolutely brilliant if they do it right.
Interesting. And do you consider, obviously I don't, from what your from our conversation, it doesn't sound like you consider this to be a replacement for the original.
It's a sequel. That's the way I look at it. It's there's days when I think of it as a sequel and days when I think of it as a sidequel. It's definitely not a replacement. It's a new story in that world. Mm-hmm. Or it's kind of a multiverse of madness kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I always consider it to be like a companion piece.
Yes.
Like it sits alongside of it.
It's something else in the same world with those familiar characters, but are they familiar characters? These are new versions of those characters. Like I say, a different part of the multiverse, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah. Multiverse, I think, is actually really fair and a really fair estimation of what that looks like. Yeah, for sure. Next up is the dynamic duo of James and JJ of RetroFits as they talk about minigames, materia, and share some final thoughts on Final Fantasy VII as an experience. What I love about the game too is that there's all sorts of cool side stuff in Final Fantasy VII, more than anything previous. And I'm not talking like side quests or like just emerging gameplay stuff like the snowboarding and you're running against this timer, you're having a slap fest, like all these weird little gameplay elements sprinkled through makes it really fun and really cool. I love that about the game.
Or even the little mini game when you were climbing up the mountain and you had to keep your core temperature up.
That was a weird one. Yep.
The motorcycle, I was always glad they made into one of the games in the arcade at the Gold Saucer.
Yeah, those were great.
They made most of them.
They made all of them, including the submarine battle, into a mini game.
Yep. Yeah, well, so many of them just come out of left field, and like the slap fight in particular, now that you've brought that up, was funny to me because you're supposed to act before the instructions come up on the screen, because if you wait for like the little screen to pop up that actually has the controls on it, like that half a second you have has already passed, and Scarlet immediately just like smacks you super hard and you have to like recover. So it's like if you don't know
about that one.
Oh, and I recently and you can cut this out if you feel like I'm adding or outing someone.
That's fine.
I recently blew Julian's mind from the stage select because I told him the secret of the Mr. Dolphin jumping section, which is, and this is absolutely true, and I still to this day don't know how I figured it out. It was through pure trial and error, and I don't remember the exact moment of childhood I was at when I figured out this worked. Because you're supposed to like move Cloud around by swimming and try to get the perfect angle and just jump him up. If you leave Cloud perfectly where he is and you blow the whistle once, the dolphin will come and he'll jump you and you'll miss, obviously. You move nowhere. But if you blow the whistle again without moving at all, that's the perfect spot. It gets you right on the pole and you can just go straight up. It takes 2 seconds.
I do remember that, yes.
Wow. Whoa. Okay, I had no idea.
It automatically resets you into the perfect position.
Oh,
Yeah.
Weird. So it's assuming you're going to try to like move around and find the right spot, but no, it just puts you. Oh, that's so weird.
If you move from the very starting position and then blow the whistle, the technique doesn't work because it drops you somewhere like that it would measure for you to be. So blowing it again from there won't work. But where you start, the game is just designed to let you blow the whistle twice and get past it.
That's so interesting and good. Oh my gosh. Imagine if you had revealed that to people back in the day. Like the amount of time people wasted trying to get that stupid dolphin to do that thing. Oh, that's wild.
Well, some people like had to work for hours because it was not particularly obvious.
Yeah.
Like, exactly how far you moved at which particular height. It was brutal.
That is pretty brutal. That is funny. Speaking of the materia system, I'd love to talk about that a little bit because I think mechanically Final Fantasy VII is actually one of my favorite Final Fantasy games. I really love the materia system. I like how it's stripped down. It really strips down a lot of it to the bare essentials, which I actually, for me, I like. I'm not big into systems, so for me, that's a good thing. What's your take on the play of Final Fantasy VII?
It allowed for customization in such a way that limited it in terms of utility. And what I mean by that is, so the closest comparison, I guess, would be Final Fantasy VI. If you equip people with an Esper, they learn spells, and essentially everybody can learn every spell. Right. You get different bonuses. You get different level up bonuses depending on which Espers that you equip. Essentially, you can mold any character to like become a god, essentially.
Right.
And at face value, because obviously JJ described the broken materia combinations you can get, at face value, the materia system is very different because you have to sort of pick and choose. Like, you only have so many slots that you can use, and some of them are just single slots. Some of them are fused together for those like combo moves that you can try to do. But essentially, you have to pick and choose. Like, okay, well, who's going to be the person that like steals for this part of the game? Like, who's going to be the person who like is almost exclusively magic user? Who's going to be the person that, attack, like, has magic, but I'm just using the elemental combination so that their like super powered attack moves are even better, that sort of thing. It made you really think about what you were trying to do rather than just omni-specking out everybody and then trying to figure things out from there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I agree with it. Yeah, that makes sense. A lot of sense. Yeah, I agree with that. JJ, what do you think about it, man?
Yeah, he said it exactly, and especially with it really would depend on the boss too, because you could have a general build, but more often than not, you'd run up against a boss, you'd get your shit completely cleaned, and then you would have to be like,
Yep.
let me try something different.
Yeah. You're exactly right. And that I love the idea that it made me feel like a genius when I cracked the code. When I figured it out, I was like, I'm a genius. I am the master of this system. When it really was just putting colors together and making it make sense. But I think it's very elegant in that way. I like when I feel smart. What can I say? I don't get many opportunities to feel smart in a given day. So that's
the materia system is good at that. It is good at making you feel like smart.
Really is. It really is effective at that, for sure. With our last few minutes, man, I just love to hear any final thoughts on Final Fantasy VII. Where's it rank for you, maybe in the long lineage of Final Fantasy games? And you just kind of like final thoughts on the game from a personal perspective, kind of what it maybe means to you. Yeah, just love to hear it.
It's something I kind of have to consider carefully, because I know it's within the top 5 for me, just as a personal ranking, but at the same time I kind of like it's the 5, and it's not that I don't still love it, it's not that I don't still have a great affection for it. It's more along the lines of I don't think that people quite understand how gaming has progressed as an interactive media form, because when they re-released the original Final Fantasy VII, and it was coming out on Steam, it was coming out on Switch and like PS3 and PS4, and well, the PS3 one was just the PlayStation game again. But the PS4 one, where it was like somewhat redone, they all had things where like you could click in one of the sticks and suddenly all of your attacks did like quadruple 9s.
Right.
Or like you got all your health back and all your characters are invincible, like stuff like that.
Little cheat modes.
Yeah. And the thing is, those were put in specifically because they were absolutely necessary. I promise this actually has a point that makes sense. So when Final Fantasy VII came out, gaming was something that was, thanks to the PlayStation, the oldest demographic of gamers that were really targeted. I don't think it's fair to say that this is all that there was, but it was definitely the major target audience. Right. Were at most somewhere between 14 and 16 years old. Like you didn't necessarily have to have a job. You went to school, and then as long as you were like getting your homework done, and even then, that's sort of optional. Right. You could just spend hours doing that on some days. And the thing is that as gaming has progressed with time, that same demographic is still like the main audience for gaming in the like contemporary era. But we don't have that time anymore. What they call quality of life updates are things like, you can skip cutscenes. And that's because like if you lose progress and you have to go back through an area where the cutscenes are like 30 minutes total just to get through story, like you might not have 30 minutes to get through it again, to try the part where you lost again.
Save early, save often.
Well, that's kind of what I mean is like, with the heavy storytelling in a lot of games, you might not have had a chance to save. Like, it could be like all these cutscenes lead up to the boss fight that you lost. And that you have to like try again with a different strategy. And then you're just like, I guess I can, I can skip this. And like having story difficulty in games is sort of like thrown in as a joke for a lot of like memery and internet like funny shenanigans. But in reality, there's people who are like, this is a very cool world, and I like, this is very well written, and I want to experience this story for all that it is. And I do not have 50 hours to master the exact angle to fire this very specific arrow at this very specific metal dinosaur part 8 times in a row just to disable it so that I can then figure out which arrow actually does damage to it before it gets up and tramples me. I do not have time to put it on extra hard mode to fight the Thunderjaw and feel like a big old grown man. I just need to get past it so that I can get to Meridian and get the parts I want. Okay, man, I can't do this right now. And that's the truth of it, is that Final Fantasy VII, as it is, just as its own product for PS1, it requires time investment because
it does.
Absolutely.
We didn't consider it like hardcore grinding as kids because we're like, oh, it tops out between like 40 and 50 hours, if you really know what you're doing. Most people don't have that for a game they've already played, and most of that time is spent in between the stuff you actually enjoy about the game.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. It is a game that requires a time investment, and vanilla, there's no shortcuts. There really isn't. You got to fight those 8 arrows. That's a very, very interesting point. So I guess what I'm getting from that is it's almost a challenging recommend for like a modern gamer, unless you have the time, or play a version where you can kind of hit the double sticks and it's 999 damage. You can get through the friction of it.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah, for younger gamers and like kids and people who don't just have the time, but like want to invest the time and really want to get into it, it's a definite recommend.
Oh, totally.
But for people in our like age bracket that like grew up with this stuff, oh no, you need to get the new version that has the like, I can win this battle and get out of this area faster. It sounds like cheating, but then you realize, oh, I can do so much more of the parts of this game that I actually really like.
Right. Right. That's fair. I respect that a lot. JJ, what are some final thoughts from you, man?
For me, the whole series as a whole, it really helped me growing up because my dad died whenever I was young, and honestly, the Final Fantasy games helped me get through that. And 7, 8, 9, of course, is my all-time favorite. In terms of where I would put 7, I would definitely say top 5. I would agree with that.
Okay.
And yeah, it was just, there's a reason I've come back to this game many times. Some of it was because my brother erased my save game. That had like 70 hours on it.
No.
Oh yeah, that happened more than once with more than one game.
No. But this is a game you still find yourself going back to, though.
Yes,
and it sounds like it has that. And it sounds like it really was a formative game for you.
Oh, totally.
And finally, closing out this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40 is Josh from the Still Loading podcast. So let's talk a bit about some of your personal history with the game. What was your first experience with Final Fantasy, maybe your first entry point, and then we'll kind of go from there and talk about the games themselves.
So my first entry with Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VII, as with a lot of people kind of my age, like in their mid-30s and whatnot, growing up with RPGs. What kind of made me fall in love a little bit more with the series as a whole, though, was as I kind of saw how the series evolved from 7 through 10. But 7, I remember being at a friend's house down the street, and I vividly remember the section of the game because I didn't know what was happening. And he was telling me about how great the graphics were. And I had an N64 at the time, not a PlayStation. So when I saw Cloud, like not in the battle screen cloud, but regular little chibi cloud climbing up. Excuse me, it was in Wall Market, and it's going up the big thing to get to the top of the plates in Midgar. And he's telling me, he's like, look at these graphics, and I'm watching. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is nowhere near as good as Zelda. This like Ocarina of Time, way better looking. And then he showed me the battle systems. I'm like, okay, that's actually pretty cool. He did not show me any of the CG cutscenes, which I'm sure if he would have, it would have blown my mind.
Lost your mind.
But he did not show me any of that. So that was my first experience with it. I didn't really understand what I was looking at. I didn't understand what was happening. I had no idea what was going on. So that was the first one. And then the second time, I remember I became friends with someone I'm still friends with now. His name's Andy. And he was telling me like, oh, Final Fantasy VII is great. And I said like, oh, that's cool. But like, I've never played a Final Fantasy. Shouldn't I start at the first one? He's like, no, you don't need to worry about it. Like you don't like they're completely different stories in each one. I'm like, oh, so there's no like sequel type of thing. The stories don't continue. All right, I'll give Final Fantasy VII a try. And played Final Fantasy VII and fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. It was one of the first times in a game that I remembered like really experiencing like this epic story. And it's one of those games where it hit me at the right place at the right time. I feel like kids who grow up to be gamers and have this passion for gaming, even into adulthood, I feel like the most seminal games for that specific individual are the games that affected them emotionally between like 11 and 16 years old, like somewhere in that 5-year age range, 5-year gap, where you've gained enough emotional and mental faculty to start being discerning and learning what games you like and what you don't. And you think you're a lot smarter than you actually are, because everyone does at every single age. I know part of this also, we were talking about like memories and stuff with this, like just the memories around it.
Yep.
Well, one of my close friends, Tristan, I actually got him into Final Fantasy as well. After my friend Andy got me into it, I played 1 through 8, or sorry, not 1 through 8, sorry, 7 and 8. And then I told Tristan about it, and Tristan was really hesitant to get into it because the graphics. He was very much like, these graphics are awful. This is nothing. Because I think I was getting him into it around like 2004, 2005. So this is like right on the beginning of like PC gaming really kind of taking off, and like the 360 eras either here or close. I think 360 came out in 2004. So yeah, like 360 era was already here. PS3 was just about out. Yep. So graphics were much better than what we were seeing in Final Fantasy VII, but I convinced him to play it. Once he got over the graphics, he really liked Final 7. He really liked Final Fantasy 8, and then 9 ended up being one of his favorites as well. And then we would play 10. I would go over to his house every single day to play Final Fantasy 10, and I would bring over my memory card, and we would we were trying to actually get all the ultimate weapons for all the different characters in 10, which has like, that's a wild way. I don't know how much you know about those ultimate weapons in 10.
Oh, I've gotten all of them. 10 is one of the games I have a ton of experience. I have done it in my past, not as a 40-year-old, or I don't even think a 30. Maybe I was like maybe 30. I don't even know when I did it. But I do not have the time for that. But I have dodged all the lightning bolts and the thunder planes, and I've played full seasons of Blitzball.
Wow.
Because I love me some Blitzball. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. I love me some Blitzball.
I wish I did, because it's a really thought out. It's a really well thought out mini game. It's not.
Yes.
It's not a mini game. It's a full on sport programmed into the game.
Yes.
It's nuts.
Yeah. I absolutely love it. I am a big fan of all that stuff. But so I have I've tried to get the chocobo race under 0 seconds, because you can, I think, to get one of them, it might be for Titus, I can't remember which. I think for one of them you have to win the chocobo race with a combined time of less than 0 seconds. That means you have to pick up, get enough -5 pickups.
I did that one.
That your time is under 0.
One. That was one of the only ones I did. I did because Yuna's was really easy.
Yeah.
And then I did Tidus's because I wanted Tidus's, but I didn't care about anyone else's.
Oh no, I got all of them. All of them. 10 down, one more to go as we continue our deep subterranean dive of Final Fantasy VII. Next week, we are going to conclude the series with some more final thoughts from a whole bunch of Mikes. So if you're a fan of people named Mike, you come on by next week. You will be more than satisfied. Many thanks, as always, to my editors, Kev from the Discord and Pete Hardy. Thank you again to my patrons for supporting me on Patreon. And thank you for listening, commenting, and sharing all of these episodes of A Gamer Looks at 40. The success of the show depends entirely on you, so thank you for being a part of it. And until next time, just be kind to yourselves and each other.